Hello and welcome to this episode of Beat Teacher Burnout. I'm your host, Rowena Hicks, and I have a wonderful guest with me today, Dr. Helen Kelly, and she's going to start talking us a little bit about how leader well-being is instrumental to actually the success of the whole school, the success of culture in the school, the success of the staff, the students, and of course the knock-on to the families. So welcome, Helen. It's great to have you on here today.
Hi, Rowena. It's really good to be on. Thank you for inviting me. I've been looking forward to it.
Oh, thank you. Well, I know you've been a solicitor, you've been a school leader, and now you are sort of a well-being guru in lots of ways. So do you want to tell people a little bit about you and your journey?
Yeah, I only realised a few years ago that actually my kind of passion and interest in workplace wellbeing began in my first career. I was a solicitor and I acted for trade union members who'd had accidents at work and industrial diseases. And then for whatever various reasons, I requalified to become a teacher and then became a school leader really quickly. And I think probably 5 years into my journey as a principal, I began this kind of road towards burnout. And in 2019, I experienced a burnout myself. And I decided to cut my career short. I was 55 at the time, I think, and planned to retire. And, it was smack bang in the middle of COVID. And there was a lot of talk for the first time, really, about staff well-being in schools. And because this had been the focus of my doctoral thesis and I'd had a blog talking about this, people started reaching out and asking me for help. And so from that, this kind of new direction emerged for me. I published my book 2 years ago, and now I work with schools and with individuals and also with some government agencies, universities and so on, focusing upon workplace well-being in schools.
Wow, thank you. Can I ask, if you don't mind telling us, what did burnout look like for you as a principal?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question because I think people often are not sure themselves if they're burnt out, and it's a term that's bandied about and overused, So I think that in the months coming up to I was exhausted, like we all are. School leaders are pretty much all exhausted. But I think the tell is when you start to feel detached and from your role, and you start to feel a bit cynical, and you feel that you're not really you don't believe in what you're doing anymore as a school or in your role. And that started happening to me. And then quite kind of interesting, I'm sure if any of my former colleagues listen to this, they would smile, but I became really quite belligerent with my other senior colleagues. There were lots of fallings out. There was a lot of sense of me feeling that I was being treated unfairly. There was raised voices, there were tears at times, and relationships at the senior level really kind of broke down. And then I started working harder and harder and harder, presenting at conferences, doing all kinds of stuff to kind of prove myself, and got more and more and more exhausted. And then I started experiencing chest pain. And to cut a long story short, while it was discovered I had heart disease, which there's a familial history of, the chest pain was caused by spasms in my arteries that were actually caused by stress. And I was told by the cardiologist that I needed to eradicate stress from my life. I went into hospital for a bit and had 8 weeks off during the summer. And when I came back to work after the summer, it was so apparent to me that I just couldn't go on. I'd kind of fallen off a cliff, and I was kind of down there looking at everybody else up there and realizing that I just couldn't go back to that level of stress again. It was overwhelming.
Wow. Gosh, thank you for sharing that. It's so interesting because as a deputy head, I just loved my role. I was passionate about it, and being very driven and conscientious and a bit of a people pleaser, I threw myself into my role. I didn't have boundaries or anything healthy like that. And for me, I had all these warning signs of, being taken by ambulance to A&E with chest pain. And actually, after 2 weeks off, I just launched myself straight back in and went into it and tried to work harder to get more done. I was so exhausted, not sleeping. And actually my children were saying, Mum, what are you doing? You're killing yourself here. And I was going, no, because I'm important. I'm needed there. What's going to happen if I'm not there? And I think for leaders, we often think we're indispensable, and the harsh reality is we're not. But I ended up very, very sick. And it was the GP who said to me, Rowena, if you don't stop, you actually could die.
Yeah.
So I guess, for some of us who are very driven, we need a bit of a harsh wake up call. But I know you talk about the burnout continuum
Yeah.
because it's very difficult. I've even asked you who diagnoses burnout because we talk about it such a lot. Can you explain the continuum to people listening?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I think it's important to say that apart from in some Scandinavian countries, burnout is not recognised as a medical condition. Burnout is an occupational condition that's been recognised by the World Health Organization since May 2019, which was the month that I experienced my, falling off a cliff. And the foremost researchers into this are called Maslach and Leiter, and they have put this on a continuum to help us to understand that all employees in all jobs around the world are on this continuum somewhere. And at one end of the continuum is engaged, which is where we all start our careers. We're not exhausted. We feel committed. We believe in what we're doing. We believe that we're effective. But then depending upon the demands of our job and our capacity to cope with those demands, throughout the period of our career, we move up and down that continuum from engaged into the direction of burnout. And, we can move, it goes both ways. We can go back towards the engaged end. It's not a one-way street. And that's why I think it's important for people to understand that it's on a continuum, that if you start to feel overwhelmed, until you reach that point of burnout where you fall off that cliff, you can put steps in place to help you to come back along that continuum to the healthy end. It's not inevitable that you'll move in one direction.
Okay, so let's talk to the leaders listening, or actually it'll apply to the teachers, I'm sure. What are some steps they could take if they're feeling on that continuum that they're going towards the burnout and it's getting quite concerning?
Yeah,
What would you be
well,
saying?
I think that I like to think of, again, drawing on the work of Maslach and Leiter, but putting the work of other, everything I do is research based. It's not just because I think it is so. It's because other people much more clever than I am have dedicated their lives to this field, And the way I conceptualize the research is threefold. What the causes of burnout are workload, workplace culture, and work recovery. They're all W's and they're three. I quite like that. It kind of appeals to me. And I think that within each of those, there are short, medium, and long-term things that people can do. I think that if someone is moving in that direction of, rapidly and coming close to burnout, the quickest and easiest thing that they can do is look at their work recovery. We know that burnout is actually a condition of the workplace. It's not a condition of the individual. And ultimately, the best way to address burnout is to address it at the workplace level. However, if we do not have our work recovery in place, this is the easiest place that we can start as individuals to take control, that personally, we can impact without having to think about the workplace. So the research there says that there are 4 things that we should be doing regularly and frequently to maximise our work recovery. The first one, and I won't talk about all of these in detail, but the first one is the most important one. And that's the one that I kind of post about a lot on LinkedIn. It's called psychological detachment. And this is the one that leaders are very poor at. So it's about being able to switch off from work during your non-work time. And if we are going to avoid burnout, it is absolutely essential that we are able to switch off, not just from doing work, but from thinking about work. And there are many practical ways in which we can do that. There are new habits that we can form. For example, I'm going to pick up my phone now. The first thing that you do when you wake up in the morning should not be pick this up and look at your school emails. It's a simple thing, but you need to have a buffer when you wake up in the morning. Likewise, you need to have strategies in place to make sure this is under control in the evenings. The first thing I did when I realized I was not well was get rid of all the apps and notifications. So now, in order to check my work emails, I have to go in through the browser and put my password in every single time, which is really annoying, but it stops me from doing that dopamine hit thing where you're doing this all the time. You know, building those boundaries between work and home. And, you know, I could talk about this for a couple of hours. It's a whole workshop, but finding ways to build those boundaries, finding time to ensure that you have time for yourself regularly and frequently, not occasionally. You know, the research shows that the benefits of the weekend only last till Tuesday. The benefit of a holiday, no matter how long the holiday, lasts about a fortnight.
Right.
So it's really important that we're putting in place these work recovery practices, especially psychological detachment, both in the evenings and at weekends, not just one weekend a month, but every weekend.
Yeah.
Just very quickly, the other work recovery experiences are relaxation, which I think we all know a lot more about. The third one is control. So having control over how we spend our non-work time. So not spending our whole free time ferrying the kids around to football and that kind of stuff, or caring responsibilities with elderly relatives. And then the final one is mastery experiences, which is the one that surprises people the most. This is where we need to be experiencing a sense of achievement in our non-work time that isn't connected to our work, through hobbies that give us that dopamine hit, things that are becoming progressively more challenging. So I think that if you feel that you're moving in that direction and you're worried, the first thing that you can do as a leader or a teacher is look at your work recovery and put that right, because it's much simpler to do that and you have much more control over that than trying to figure out how you're going to reduce your workload or improve the quality of your workplace culture, which are obviously instrumental, but harder to address in the, you know, immediately. Does that make
Yeah.
sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, I have a journal, Beating Teacher Burnout, and at the back of it, there's two amazing young school teachers have designed, and they let me put it into the journal, a way of planning your week so that as a member of staff, leader or teacher, or other actually, you plan in things like a regular gym, a regular walk, a regular date night, things where then you work your work around it. You fit your work into your life, if you like,
Yeah.
because they said that that way they sleep better, they eat better, they manage life better, and they have things to look forward to. And I always tell the story of when my eldest son, he told me, I came back from work at about 8 o'clock one night. I was so exhausted and I wasn't sleeping well. I couldn't switch off from work. And he said, Mum, go to the gym. And
Yeah.
I said, I can't. I'm so tired. And he said, just try, just do it for me. So I went off to the gym and I just had a half-hour swim, nothing big, major. I got back and I just felt fantastic and I slept so well. And that doesn't make sense to me on many levels, but it does work.
It
And
does
I
work.
think we don't,
Yeah.
yeah,
You know, the
go on.
research shows there are two things that work better than anything else. You know, as far as relaxation is concerned, we all have hobbies and things we enjoy and we think we know how to relax. But the research shows the two things that are more successful than other things. One is being active out of doors. That doesn't mean you have to run around the park. It means, you know, just go out and have a stroll. And the other thing is social relaxation. Now, the reason I mention that is because it reminds me of, you know, what you just said about going to the gym. We've all experienced this, haven't we? We get home from work, we realise we've committed to go to the pub quiz that night or something similar. And we really don't want to go because we are absolutely exhausted. But within half an hour of being there and chatting with others, we suddenly realise we feel better. And actually what's happening is the hormonal environment of our body is changing and we're moving from stress response into relaxation response. And that is absolutely essential. So we just need to remind ourselves it will make me feel better and make that effort to go. You know, it makes a huge difference. I think that other things that individuals can do that will make a difference immediately is get some social support. So if you don't have a professional coach, there's good tangible research now to show that that is extremely effective for school leaders. Some research at one of the UK universities that was funded by the NAHT. It's very clear now the benefits of for leadership directly related to well-being. So I think that that's something else that can make a difference really quickly to someone. And if you don't have the funds to make that happen, then reach out to your networks. And if you don't have networks, find networks. There are lots of networks out there that don't cost money to be part of. And I think that one of the things that probably saved me from burning out sooner was when I was working in Germany as a principal in Berlin. And that was when things first started to become quite hard for me. I was a member of a network of primary principals across the whole of Germany. And we only met once or twice a year in a city somewhere in Germany, random city, and had dinner. But in between times, we could email, we could phone, and it just helped us to feel that we were not alone. And what we were experiencing was actually normal, common. And it took the shame away. There's a lot of shame around feeling that you're not coping, feeling overwhelmed. And I think one of the reasons I started on this journey with school leaders was to help people to understand that there's no shame, they're not alone, and actually what you're feeling is extremely common.
Yeah, that's so helpful to hear, isn't it? And I think that goes for the teachers as well. You need a place where you can meet with people who get it, because certainly as a teacher, a lot of my family and friends didn't understand the way I needed to have this intensity through term and then crash in the holidays, and actually need other teachers around you who get that. I just before we finish, Helen, I just want to come back to where you said before we started recording, you told me that in your view, leader well-being basically impacts leader effectiveness. So then staff well-being impacts their effectiveness, and student well-being, we know, and we have a lot of work on this at the moment, impacts their effectiveness. So in terms of changing culture, that's going to start with leader looking at their well-being and investing in it. What would you have to say on that, in more detail?
Yeah, I think I've been quite frustrated over it's been 13 years now that I've been in this field, but it's 5 years that I've been doing this kind of full time. And I've become quite frustrated because there's a lot of interest and engagement with me around leader well-being, but people don't want to kind of do things, whether that be at a school level or at an individual level, to make an impact. And I think that it's important to understand that well-being cascades down the organization from the top. The leader, there's so much research to show that healthy employees make more effective employees. So a healthy leader is going to make better decisions. They'll problem solve better. They'll have better communication skills. Again, that's a whole kind of podcast just on its own. But what we also know is that there are many ways in which the leader's well-being and the leader's demeanor impacts staff, and in turn that impacts students. And one, for example, would be that we mirror each other's behavior. It's called contagion theory. So if a leader is not feeling great, they're exhausted, they're not sleeping, they're stressed, they will go into school and they will give off, hormones that are contagious. And if they go in feeling negative, that will make their staff feel negative. And staff will then pass that down to students. And so, there are many, many ways. Being a role model is another one. If we model well-being, then that's more likely to cascade down. So there are ways in which research in the field of psychology shows us that there is a direct link between how we are and how we feel as leaders, and how staff are and feel, and how students are and feel, and how we are and how we feel directly impacts our effectiveness in our role. So it comes back to, if we can start at the top, invest in leader well-being, that will have a knock-on effect down the chain from staff to students, and ultimately students' success, well-being, academic success, all of that is the bottom line. That's what we're there for, isn't it? So
Yeah.
I think if we can focus upon, if we look after our leaders and if we as leaders look after ourselves, ultimately our students will benefit. That's what we're all in it for.
Absolutely. And there's a piece of research I read recently saying that when the teacher is doing really well, students can do up to 20% better.
Yeah,
And that
absolutely.
that just that makes it an absolute no-brainer when you take it up to the other end, that leaders need to be investing in themselves, and then teachers also need to be investing in themselves. But as you say, it does take some brave action. And I know, small habits, when you build on small habits, they have an exponential impact, don't they?
They absolutely do. So, one of the things that I encounter the most, especially with coaching, and people just contact me randomly all the time, to kind of seek support, is that people's leaders, and it's the same for teachers, often think, oh, it's not worth doing this or that, taking action, because it's such a small thing and it won't make a difference. But all the research shows if we make small changes over time, they lead to more small changes, which ultimately leads to an upward spiral of well-being. So we can change the direction in which we're moving along that burnout continuum just by taking one small step to commit to, in the morning, I'm not going to pick up my phone. I'm going to get out of bed. I'm going to have a shower. I'm going to eat my breakfast. And then 15 minutes later, I will pick up my phone. That's one small thing. Nothing terrible is going to happen in that 15 minutes. But that is likely to then lead to more healthy habits. And over a period of a year, you could absolutely transform how you feel, and transform your well-being just from the beginnings of that one small change. So don't think it's not worth doing. Everything is worth doing.
Yeah, I love that. For my journal, which is a journal through the year for school staff, one of the bits of research I did before it was I tried with some colleagues in schools to come off your phone. Is it for 15 minutes, half an hour before bed? And the quality of your sleep is transformational.
Yes,
Everybody
absolutely.
said it is so difficult to do. And I was the worst offender, and I still struggle to do that, but it really makes a difference. So I would absolutely agree. Helen, I could go on talking to you for hours. You have so much wisdom to impart. If people want to get in contact with you and find out about your book and about what you're doing, what are the best ways for them to do that?
Yeah, you can go to my website, which is www.drhelenkelly.com, or you can find me on LinkedIn. That's where I hang out most. I'm there every day. You can also just email me on helen@drhelenkelly.com. That's Dr. DR, not doctor, full word. Yeah. So,
Okay.
and please get in touch. I love hearing from people.
Thank you. And remind viewers the name of your book.
My book is called School Leaders Matter.
Yeah, fantastic book. Can't recommend it enough. So thank you, Helen, for your time, your wisdom, sharing so vulnerably as well as wisely. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Rowena.
Thanks for listening. I hope you took something of value from today. If you want to connect, I'm at rowenahicks.com, or I have a Facebook group, which is Preventing Teacher Burnout. So I look forward to connecting to you at one of those.